Looks so big.
Welcome to Let's Do Lunch. I am Justine Conley of AARP First Coast, and I am here today for our monthly Let's Do Lunch with Linda Levin, who is not here today. It's Andrea. You're not playing tricks on you, but with Andrea Spencer of Elder Source. Welcome.
Hi, hello, I'm Andrea Spencer, and I'm Vice President of Communications at Elder Source, and we're the Area Agency on Aging and Aging and Disability Resource Center here in Northeast Florida.
And so today, we come to you once a month to bring to you some educational, a whole variety of programs. We hope that they're entertaining, we hope that they're fun, and we hope to keep you connected and informed with what's going on in our community and how it can help you. And so today is no different.
Yes, we took a summer hiatus, but we're back with a great topic. The Sunday after Labor Day is celebrated as National Grandparents' Day. So I want to welcome our special guest. Hey, Amy Goyer. She is a family and caregiving expert for AARP, and she's also the author of a book called Things to Do Now That You're a Grandparent. So she's got some great expertise on grandparenting, multi-generational living, and intergenerational relationships. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you and talk about one of my favorite topics, grandparenting, and share some information and maybe some activities and things grandparents can do with their grandchildren.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. One of my favorite titles is Grandma, and my grandson calls me Grammy, and I don't see him nearly as much as I'd like to, but grandparenting is such a great topic. So I've read a lot about grandparenting, been a grandparent, and so I'm noticing again that things are changing and moving in a variety of ways. Technology is just one of them. Could you tell us some ways that grandparenting is changing?
Yeah, grandparenting has always played an important role in people's lives. Grandparents throughout the ages have this role, especially a role in terms of childcare. And that, that importance hasn't really changed, but we know that we have about 70 million grandparents in the US right now. And the vast majority, like you, feel like their role is very important. And it's very important to them. It's very important to their family, to their grandkids, et cetera. And the traditional roles are really, kind of embraced. Some of those things don't seem to change. Grandparents see themselves as sharing family history and giving wise advice and kind of being a safe place for their grandchildren. And of course, they love to spoil their grandchildren.
Yes.
But things, have changed. Technology has changed things for grandparents. Plus, grandparents are kind of dispelling all those old myths. They are not sitting on the porch and rocking chairs. I mean, you're a typical example of 4 in 10 grandparents are working, so they're busy. The grandparents have active lives, and they often feel really torn in multiple directions. Like you said, you'd love to spend more time with your grandchild. That's kind of typical, but they are finding different ways to be in touch. So the great advent of video chat, which we've all discovered during the pandemic even more, but grandparents, I think, really have embraced this because they didn't want to miss seeing their grandchildren growing up and spending time with them and building that relationship during the pandemic. So it's really been a great gift. And they also are learning to text more and, do all of those things, although for many, telephone is still really their preferred mode of communication, but they're just finding different ways to be actively engaged in their grandchildren's lives. And if you're at a distance, they're doing things like taking a trip together, skip generation trip without the parents, or doing some different kinds of things to help build that relationship.
Just a funny story real quickly is grandparents are accustomed to being on the video with kids, and so when they came in person, the child was doing like this. they didn't know which one. You were usually coming through a screen. You were here, so
they don't know what they're like in person. Grandma is somebody on the computer. To read me a book on the computer, not in person, right? Yeah.
I want to do a quick reminder that we've got some folks tuning in on YouTube or Facebook. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat so we can ask Amy what might be on your mind. But so we talked about technology is sometimes can be a barrier, but we've got more and more of our grandparents becoming very techno astute. But do you see any other barriers, Amy, that might prevent a close relationship with children, grandchildren and their grandparents?
Well, we know from all the surveys that AARP has done that grandparents say the biggest barrier is distance. So that's, as you say, that we're finding new ways to break down that distance. But the other barriers might include, for example, I always say the most important person in the grandparent-grandchild relationship is the parent. Because if grandparents don't have a good relationship with the parents of their grandchildren, that can be a huge barrier. Or even if the parents are very busy and they aren't taking the time to facilitate the connections and the time together with grandparents, that can be a barrier. And it may not be that there's any negative reason for it. They're just busy and overwhelmed and don't make the time or think to do it. Some grandparents have physical limitations that it's hard, they don't build the same relationship if they can't get out and go hiking with her, do some of the physical things, get down on the floor, whatever. But I think that's less and less the case. Although, we have a lot of great grandparents and even great grandparents now, because everyone's living longer and maybe living longer with some chronic health issues. But this creates, grandchildren kind of motivate us to be creative and find ways to connect. Another barrier might be the grandchild's age. You can do different things with grandchildren at their age. True. So, if you're at a distance and there's an infant, it's really hard, you can't hold the infant or do things or get, it's a different kind of connection. On the other hand, if they're teenagers and they're absent from the family for a while, they're just basically not interested in anything having to do with their family, or they're just busy doing their own life, which they should be at that age. There can be periods of time when your relationship doesn't feel as close, but be patient. They always come back around.
They do. That's the good thing. And there are just different stages, which I always love to have to remind. So I heard a quote that says, if I knew that grandparenting would be this fun, I would have done it first. Yeah.
Everybody says that. Yeah.
So we know that people are living longer. Grandparents are working and doing a variety of things. So the roles are not as traditional as they've been. How about, are you seeing where grandparents are having to raise their grandchildren, and what are some of the things that you're seeing around that?
Yes. And, I used to head up the AARP's grandparent program, and I did a lot of work in supporting grandparents raising grandchildren for many years. There are about 2.3 million grandparents in the U.S. who are responsible for grandchildren. And that is a whole different relationship. And the hard thing for those grandparents is you don't get to be the traditional grandparent to those grandchildren. You may have other grandchildren you're not raising, but your relationship, and you may have a closer relationship because they're living with you and you're taking care of them. But it's also, you're the disciplinarian, and you have to, you have to make them do their homework, and all of the things that parents have to do. And it's kind of a different kind of relationship. It usually happens because there's a crisis or a chronic problem in the family. So that's not ever a good thing. Either a parent has an addiction problem, a parent has been killed, is the death of a parent is deployed in the military. It might be divorce in the family. There's a range of reasons why this can happen, and increases recently tend to be around opioid epidemic and the abuse and addictions problems. But grandparents have always kind of had this role of stepping in. Even George and Martha Washington raised grandchildren. So they raised two of Martha's grandchildren. And, they didn't have any children together. So they were from her first marriage. And that was because Martha's son was fighting in the war and was killed. And so he had 4 children, and 2 of the children stayed with the child's mother, and 2 went to live with the grandparents because the mother couldn't handle or afford all of them at once, apparently. So even back then, grandparents stepped up to the plate, and that's what grandparents are doing now. We have some great resources for grandparents raising grandchildren. I wrote a guide for grandfamilies that's on the AARP website. You can go to this link, or you can Just Google AARP Grand Families Guide and you'll find it. And then there's also some state fact sheets that AARP collaborates on with several other organizations, Generations United, the American Bar Association, and others. And that's just grandfamilies.org. And if you go to grandfamilies.org, or if you just Google Grand Facts State Fact Sheet, you'll get some information and information about local supports, programs that are in your state that are resources for you.
We have a helpline at Elder Source, and we get about 6,000 calls a month. And so many calls that do come in, are from the grandparents raising grandchildren. So I really appreciate all those resources, and I'll definitely pass them on to our staff. But I glanced at them. They're great. There are so many things that are available. So the whole notion of I'm alone doing this, that's not necessarily true. It might not be your next door neighbor who's walking the same walk, but there are tremendous resources out there through AARP's website. And these are just a good smattering of what is out there, not only on AARP, but the other sister sites. So that is really appreciative, I think, for our audience. So I'm thinking, we touched a little bit upon this about the connection with our grandparents. What other tips can you provide to have an emotional, relationship with grandparents? And I think about my grandparents who didn't speak English. They were Polish. And so there was that language barrier. And my parents did not want us to be dipping into the old Polish world. So I never grew up and being able to converse with them. It was very difficult. So I regret that, not having some sort of emotional connection to them other than, the Sunday dinner where I didn't understand what was being talked about. So some of those connections that people can have,
Really good point. The language barriers really can make a difference. On the other hand, sometimes the grandchildren are the translators for the grandparents.
Yes.
If English isn't their first language. And our most recent grandparent study found that we're seeing increasing numbers of grandparents who have at least one grandchild who doesn't have the racial ethnic background that they have. There are some different things. And they put a lot of emphasis on teaching heritage and keeping traditions going and of what they know. So it is unfortunate, like you say, that you missed out. You feel like you missed out because your grandparents didn't speak the language. And again, that's where the parents come in, because they're probably the ones who are translating and trying to. But, the bottom line is our relationships are built on shared experiences. And all relationships really are. And that experience can be in-person experience, or they can be, digital experiences or other ways of connecting. But it's having that shared experience. So grandparents need to think about, I have a friend whose daughter never had quite the relationship she hoped she would with her mother, the child's grandmother, because the grandmother always was the one wanting to drive it. She wasn't as good at listening to her grandchild and doing, paying attention to what she wanted to do. And the grandchild always felt pressured to do, the other things. So listening is your greatest skill as a grandparent. I remember my grandmother, I had a really close relationship with her, and I could go and tell her all my woes, and she'd listen, and she'd give me a few things of wisdom. But she also one day said to me, I think I'd had a breakup, a relationship or something, and I was wanting to understand it. And I'm all in my head, and I said, so why is that? Because I figured she'd have the answer. She was in her 80s. She said, well, and she thought about it, and she said, I don't know. But it was so freeing for me, because it made me realize there isn't come an age when you know everything, which I kind of had thought, but she was honest, she was real and honest. So be yourself with your grandkids, listen to them. I've sat through over 50 focus groups with grandparents, some with grandchildren, and they always say that, this thing of the grandparent being the safe place and having that unconditional love, that sometimes it's just a different relationship with the skip generation. So have fun. Don't take it too seriously. I know you feel like you need to pass on those values and the wisdom and all that. But, have fun with your grandchild, follow their lead, and be there for them. Just be that steady person they can always go to.
Mm-hmm.
My grandson had said something really crazy and outlandish to his mom. Now, my grandson is in his 20s. And so his mom said, "I am calling your Grammy." He's like, "You're not going to call my Grammy." And so she said, "I'm calling her right now. I'm going to have her call you." And so I did. And so it was just funny to see this relationship. Yes. And so, but he listened, and he said, he could tell me some things that he might not tell them. So again, it is, like you said, taking their lead with the relationship. But it was just funny. He just couldn't believe that his mom would call him on me as a grown man. But it is what it is. So when you're thinking about grandparents and grandchildren, what are some kind of activities or things that they can do together, both not just paid but free, and things that they might not have thought about? What are some things that they can do together, kind of activities?
Well, first of all, remember to again, take the lead from the grandkids. What are they interested in doing? But it doesn't mean you can't introduce them to new things as well. Exactly. And, if you're at a distance, you do have a little bit of a disadvantage. So you have to get a little creative. I talked about the skip generation trips and having trips together. I think that's something a lot of grandparents like to do if they have, if they can afford it. If not, it's time one-on-one with them. I used to go to my grandmother's. My mom would send each of us individually to go spend a week or something with my grandparents in the summer. So we got that one-on-one attention, which I'm one of 4 girls. So that was really nice, to get that one-on-one. And when you do that, you can stretch these experiences out by doing things like planning the next adventure together. Get a map and put it on the wall, and when you're together, or if you're on video chat, put some pins in places you both want to go, and make a plan to visit somewhere together. And if that's not possible, then have a theme. Like, okay, this month we're gonna do Italy, and we're going to make a meal, an Italian meal. We're going to watch an Italian movie. We're going to learn some Italian language. We're going to read a book about Italy. There's so many different things that you could do around a theme. It could be an animal. It could be a place to go. It could be lots of different things. And so it's almost like you have a book club together. That's kind of, the two of you. And that's kind of a fun thing to do. And then the other thing you can do is when you do take trips, you can scrapbook together to, again, give it some more legs, build excitement for the next trip, and build those memories. And, the nice thing now is you can do digital scrapbooking. You don't have to necessarily be in person with tape and glue and everything, even though that can be really fun. And I'm not saying don't do that. But the digital options are really amazing now. And the nice thing is you could start a scrapbook and take turns going in and adding to it. Can I show you a site that talks a little bit about digital scrapbooking?
Absolutely.
Yeah, please
do.
Let
me share my screen here, and I will show you that. So can y'all see that? This is one of the sites that has digital scrapbooking. I like this because it's kind of a beginner's guide and tells you what digital scrapbooking is. But look at these beautiful pages, and basically you just take your digital photos and plug them in there. So we all have our phones taking photos, right? So now we have photos in digital form quite a bit. So, and you can do all kinds of things. The benefits of it. You can print them out if you want to. There are specialized printers that some scrapbooking stores have, and that type of thing. And you can or print them out on a regular size page. Some people like to have special software to work on their photos. Otherwise, you don't have to do that. You can just crop them and plop them in there and the different pages. And the nice thing is you have all different templates. I think Patty's going to show you, our behind the scenes gal, a few other sites that I know that have themes. So you could say we're going to do a jungle theme, and because we went to the zoo, and take your zoo pictures and put them on there. And that's something the child can go back and look at and remember, and you can talk about it. It's like reliving that experience together. And or you could even choose something like family history and do a scrapbook together around your own family history with pictures of different people. This particular site I think it's called, is this the Scrapbook Girls site? They have a lot of video tutorials. So you check it out. You can learn about this together. We talk a lot about how grandparents and grandchildren can teach each other things. Well, maybe your grandkids are really good at technology and they can help you figure out how to do this digital scrapbooking, right?
I'll tell you, I love this. And, we had done a little bit of this with my family and taken a variety of old pictures and put together a book that my sisters and I love to go back and look at. And that was the last part of the project, taking all the pictures and scooping them up and then having it printed in basically a coffee table book. It was really, really fun. And
really cool. Mm-hmm.
It's all about those memories, those shared experiences that you talked about, Amy.
Yeah.
Which
I just want to show you real quick too, if I may. This is a scrapbook page that I made for my parents. Can you see that? This is one that I made for my parents of Christmas time with their grandkids. Oh, and I actually made this one, but you could do this with your grandkids. My dad actually put this up in his office. He loved it so much because those memories with the grandkids are so precious. And we took pictures for the grandkids, so they had a copy of it too. And they love to go back. And now we have a lot of family stories around the things that are in these pictures. So scrapbooking can be a really fun activity to do together. And again, to give some legs to the times that you are together.
Well, you touched on the next thought that I had about not only is this time together to look back and pull it all together, but sharing the stories. That storytelling I think it's an art, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy other than having a conversation around your Thanksgiving table. So talk about a way to really capture and those family memories through storytelling. And I know that there's some things that you want to share with us about that, Amy, as well.
Yes, you make such a good point. We used to put an old-fashioned cassette tape player in the beginning and tape record our Thanksgiving dinners and our Christmas dinners when the whole family was together, because we would think about how hilarious it was because we all are talking at once and then we're telling jokes and everybody's laughing, and there's just so much that goes on in those environments. And I'm so glad we have some of those, because my grandparents, I have those memories, of my grandparents, and then my nieces and nephews have that with my parents, their grandparents. So that's one simple thing you can do, just record family conversations. But also sharing family history is a big part of being a grandparent. It's an important role to many grandparents. So telling stories and making them come alive is really one of the best skills you can have. So make them interesting for the kids. So, for example, my grandfather used to tell me about how he worked on the railroad, and he worked in the mail car. And so he would be sorting mail, and the train, and my grandfather was a great storyteller. So he'd be like rocking back and forth like he was on the train and the train was moving, and he'd be trying to sort the mail, and he acted it all out for me. And then we looked at books about trains, and, you can add these different components that make it even more real. I read about a woman whose her father made ice cream. He had an ice cream shop and he had his own recipe. And so she told her grandchildren about it. And she, found online, she found a copy of his business license,
wow,
copies of the recipe. They made the ice cream together. And, those are the things that make those stories really resonate with the kids. So you can do things like that to bring the stories alive, but also sometimes you just want to do an interview format. And the kids can interview their grandparents. My niece did that with my dad, and it's a treasure that we all have now. And now there's all these online resources. StoryCorps is a wonderful site that they have, even during the pandemic, they made it possible for people to record stories who are in two different places. So you don't have to be in the same place talking to a person right in front of you. You can interview them from a distance. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And they on their site, they have lots of suggestions of questions to ask and topics to discuss. So check out storycorps.org. The Veterans History Project, so many of our veterans we're losing them, and anything we can do to record their memories and their history is really important. So the Veterans History Project is a great resource, and there's a site where you can record their stories. And then another one is the Legacy Project. And that's when we're, again, trying to help the generations connect with each other and share stories. And they have lots of questions that you can ask and a way to record them as well. So those are some good ones. Genealogy sites can also be really helpful for that.
It's just the significance of passing on the history, and before you know it. And so the pandemic has taught us a whole lot of things about how to be present with each other, how to hear each other. And then what we're finding, or are you finding that a lot of families are living intergenerationally? Are you seeing and hearing some things about that as you are talking about caregiving?
Yes. Yeah, in fact, I've done a lot of work around multi-generational living, and we have seen a huge increase. It's like quadrupled since in the past decade, and about 6 in 10 are because of the pandemic, where families have moved in together. Wow. So that's a different opportunity, and again, it's different when you're living with your grandparents, but that wasn't really a traditional thing. My mom's grandfather lived with her family, and he would go around to each of his kids' homes and stay for periods of time. And she loved having him there. So that's really not uncommon to have multi-generational families, especially now. It's really on the rise again.
You just used the word opportunity. And I think, caregiving can be such a very intense experience, especially if you're in the sandwich generation. You're taking care of your kids. Maybe you have mom living at home, but just trying to make that little bit of a shift in your mindset to say, this is an opportunity to capture the time together that we might not normally have had. And again, that was probably one of the biggest regrets, that I did not have that time, with my grandparents or even my parents. They passed away when I was relatively young. So I think that is such an important point that you made, Amy, about seeing it as an opportunity and as a blessing and as a way for everybody to share, each other's love and stories. It's a great time. Yeah. It's stressful at times, but it can be really wonderful as well.
I agree 100%.
I missed having a grandmom. And so even now as an adult and over my life, I've had some women who have stepped into that role. We don't call them grandma, but that's the exact role that they've had in my life. But my grandfather lived with us until he died when he was 75. So we've always had a multi-generational living in the African-American culture, been a part of that culture in a lot of different ways for many generations. So as we are nearing the end of our time, I would love for you to talk about some additional resources that you might want to share, or other things that folks in the audience might want to hear and know about. And we still have minutes left. So if you have questions, if you're on Facebook Live or YouTube, please put your questions in for Amy so we can get them answered.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear about what you're doing with your grandchildren too.
Yes, always.
So you asked about, where can people go for more thoughts and information? The AARP has some wonderful articles, and we have new things coming up all the time about grandparenting, ideas, things to do, trends that we see, resources that can help you find activities and travel. We have a lot on travel with grandchildren and that sort of thing. You can go to the AARP Home and Family, Friends and Family site on the AARP.org website. There's the link right there. And you can also check out things like child development, information about child development that will help you understand what your grandkids are going through at any given time. You can check grandparenting websites. One of the best things is to just exchange ideas with your fellow grandparents.
Absolutely.
Share ideas. There are Facebook groups on grandparenting. Go on Pinterest and
definitely Pinterest.
Oh, go in. And there's so many ideas in there, and it's really great. It's like, and a lot of them are visual, so you can really see what you're supposed to do. Don't forget to ask their parents. I really want to do something special with my grandchild. What would you suggest? They know their kids the best, probably.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure that you ask them. And by the way, one of the important things that grandparents can do is reinforce their kids' parents. So their adult children who are parenting their grandchildren, give them lots of reinforcement. Tell them they're doing a good job. It's easy to come across as critical because, if you're a grandparent, you've lived through it, you probably do know things they don't know, but they've got to learn and make their own mistakes like you did too. But they need your reinforcement as well. So that's an important part of building that relationship. So ask them. And again, ask the grandkids, listen to them, ask what they want to do, get that kind of information from them, and be really patient with them. Ask them what they'd like to learn. Teach them, if they say, well, I'd like to learn how to sew, and how to sew, teach them how to sew. If they want to learn about gardening, or whatever they want to learn about, help them do that, or teach them yourself, and vice versa. Ask them to teach you something. They love that. Gives them that role. They get to be the teacher. And, even if it's not something you're going to do, like maybe they're really into skateboarding, have them explain to you exactly what they're doing. Even if you're not going to get on that skateboard, they can teach you about it. Or their favorite video game, or their favorite book, or whatever.
Amy, these are great. Thank you so much. This is the September issue of Let's Do Lunch. And we'll be back next month. It's the third Thursday of the month. And Linda Levin, who's CEO of Elder Source, will be joining us back again. And Justine, I love doing this. It's really fun.
I learn something every time. I've been a grandparent. I love grandparenting, but I learned so much about the resources. So thank you so much, Amy Goyer, for being with us. And tell us how we can find you.
Yes, you can find me online. I have amygoyer.com is my website. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, just Amy Goyer. And you can find me on the AARP website at aarp.org/Amy Goyer.
And I asked that question because she is a plethora of information and resources. So thank you again for being with us for Let's Do Lunch. See you next month.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye,
Amy.
everybody.
Christine.
Bye.